Welcome to DynamicsCon 2022 Virtual Conference, and thank you to the DynamicsCon team for having us. As we go through our presentation, please feel free to type any questions that you have into the chat and we will respond to them and have a live Q&A session at the end of our presentation. We have a really fun topic to discuss today, so let's get started. Today's topic for this session is ERP and CRM silos are history, the new business application ecosystem. So from an agenda perspective, what are we going to cover? We will do some quick introductions and then we'll discuss what we really mean by ERP and CRM silos are history, why business applications, what end users want, breaking down silos using Power Automate, Power BI, virtual entities, and dual write, and then we'll show a quick demo of dual write into action. And then we'll turn it over to you to ask questions. So diving right into introductions, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Wedul. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Jenny. My name is Jeff Wedul, and I'm a principal developer with Stoneridge Software, and have been for the last 3+ years. For the last 10 years, I've been focused primarily on Dynamics CRM, CE, and in the last few years, I've branched out to various other ERPs and data systems to design and implement integrations and data migrations with CE. In short, I'm on the tech side. Jenny?
Awesome, thank you, Jeff. And my name is Jenny Harer. I am a senior functional consultant with Stoneridge Software. Before my consulting career, I was an end user for about 10 years, beginning with CRM 4.0. And as a consultant, my passion is to help end users find simple solutions for complex issues. And one of those issues, near and dear to my heart, is breaking down silos. So I'm excited to discuss this topic today. So what do we mean by silos are history? In the olden days, systems were very separate. ERPs were in one system and CRMs were in another, and they didn't talk to each other. Many times this resulted in duplicate data entry, data that lived in one system that had to be manually rekeyed in another system. Or end users would have to print or email from one system so that it could be rekeyed by another end user in another system. Now we have connectors that help us automatically copy data from one system to another, such as dual write, Power Automate, or Logic Apps, or connectors that keep the data in one system but make it visible in other systems like Power BI or virtual entities. So why business applications? The tools that we use to develop differ based upon our audience. When we talk about data and siloing that data into different applications, we need different tools that cater to our audience. Different sets of users have different expectations on business software functionality, and we want to make sure that the tool you're using is optimized for your need. Forcing end users to use a system that does not align to those expectations causes a lot of friction. So if I work in AR, I don't need to see every single touch point that a salesperson is tracking to win new deals. It would be much too cluttered to sort through to do my own job. The core concept of sharing data becomes critical in an ecosystem that allows for multiple apps to be used within an organization. If an end user in an ERP system, I need to know when a prospect turns into a customer, and I don't want to have to manually re-enter that information that someone on the CRM side has already entered. I want that data to flow over automatically. So what do end users want? They want an interface that speaks to them. They want easy mobility when they're out in the field and need data at their fingertips. They want to easily see the data they need to get their jobs done. That means not having to rekey duplicate data into multiple systems, but also having data from one system available in another. Easy reporting and analytics. End users want to see data in a clean, uncluttered way. A salesperson visiting a customer site doesn't want to have to sort through a list of multiple years' worth of invoices to quickly find only the open invoices. They want to see graphs and charts to show data like all open invoices, most commonly used order products, last date of sale, and purchase timeline trends. So all that being said, how do we break down our silos? So I gave examples before of some connectors that can be used to move data from one system to another. One of the most common ways we do this is Power Automate. So what is Power Automate and how can it assist in breaking down silos? Power Automate has over 370 connectors, maybe more now, like Teams, Twitter, WordPress, Power BI, SharePoint, LinkedIn, Outlook, Business Central, Dropbox, Dataverse, Microsoft Planner, MailChimp, and GitHub. In addition to these out-of-the-box connections, users can create custom connections. So the ability to connect two systems using Power Automate is virtually endless. Not only that, but Power Automate has ready-to-use templates for commonly used automations, such as sending an email when a new message is added in Teams, creating a task in Planner based on an Outlook calendar event, and saving email attachments to OneDrive automatically. Another example I gave was how to keep data in its respective system, but surface that data in another system. And I can accomplish this with Power BI. For example, we could create a Power BI report in Microsoft Dynamics Nav or F&O and show that report in a dashboard in CE. Not only that, but if I have a unique ID that is the same in my two environments, I can display information for individual records. For example, if I have a customer in my F&O environment and an account in my CE environment, and both records share a customer ID number, I can use a JavaScript to pull in my Power BI report created with my F&O data and show that data specific to a single account on a tab in my CE environment. So Power Automate and Power BI are two options to break down silos. I'll pass the mic over to Jeff to discuss virtual entities and dual write.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. First, I'm going to hit the surface of virtual entities, also called virtual tables. Virtual entities is a technology that allows us to read and update data in Dataverse from an external data source. So that means that data living in, say, an Azure SQL database can be brought through Dataverse onto a model-driven Power App like CE. To be clear, the data actually resides in the external data source. There's no duplication of data, and it is not actually stored in Dataverse. The virtual entity is an entity by Dataverse definition, but is simply the entity metadata and allows for the data to pass through. Full CRUD operations are supported: create, read, update, delete. This is relatively new. Up until recently, we weren't able to update and delete data. Virtual entities do require plugin code development to create a connection provider, or it requires custom development on the external source to serve up data following Microsoft's requirements of the provided OData v4 data provider. A positive, even though it requires development, a positive is that there aren't too many restrictions on what external data sources qualify for data entities or for virtual entities. However, there are limitations to what we can do with virtual entities. Most field types are supported, but some aren't. The fields can't be used in roll-up or calculated columns, and auditing is not supported. That said, I'm sure you're all thinking about business use cases for virtual entities, and if you're a database admin, you like the idea of not having to duplicate data. Now moving on to dual write. Dual write's a little different. It's a Microsoft technology specifically designed for CE and F&O integration. There's a real-time connection between CE and F&O that includes validation in both systems during the CRUD operations. Unlike virtual entities, the data lives in both environments. So, if F&O customers and CE accounts are integrated, then matching data lives in both the CE account entity and the F&O customer table. With dual write, Microsoft provides base data mappings that can be turned on to integrate customers, contacts, products and pricing, quote to order, and sales history, among others. There are ways to customize the existing data maps and create brand new maps. The options for creating new maps are only limited to the list of F&O data entities and CE entities, which is a very long list. So you can create, and it can be longer, so you can create custom data entities and Dataverse tables to use dual write to integrate. Now, while configuring a mapping, we can choose which direction the data is flowing. The data can flow from F&O to Dataverse, Dataverse to F&O, or both directions. This is configured on the field level, so an account/customer integration could include some fields that can be updated in both systems, and other fields that be updated in one or the other. We also have the ability to filter which records are integrated. So in that same account customer example, we could configure it to only integrate accounts in C that have a type of customer to F&O, filtering off, say, prospects. There is very little ability to transform the data during the integration. So when designing a mapping, the F&O data entity should closely mirror the CE entity. That the options to transform the data on the field level are to set default values or provide a value map translation where we can configure something like a country field in CE to be United States, and it should map to USA in F&O. With that, I'm going to give you a quick demo of dual write in action, and I will take on the two roles in an organization showing the free flow of data. So the first role I will assume is the salesperson. Salesperson is going to live in CE, do all of their work in there, and it's all designed to bring in sales for the rest of the company to fulfill and invoice. So you can see I've got a lead record in CE for Mike McTesterson. He's the product buyer of Acme Corp. We've got some contact information, email, address information. And so it's my turn to start some conversations with Mike. And it turns out, through some conversations, he's very interested in some quotes. So I'm going to qualify this lead, which behind the scenes in CE is actually creating an opportunity to get it into the sales pipeline. It's also creating a contact record for Mike McTesterson, as well as an account record for Acme Corp. And you can see the contact and the account record here. The account record is created as a prospect at this point. It's not an account, or it's not a customer. So I just want to prove that at this point there is no Acme on the F&O side of things. So I can continue working with Mike until we get to the point that we get a sale. Well, we'll say that we do get to that point after we've gone back and forth, some quotes. It's time to create an order. What we're going to do is prepare the account so that it can be created over on the F&O side. What you see here is our account record. I had it automatically set to a customer rather than prospect when we opened it up. Typically, we'll have an auto number system doing an account number, so I'm just going to type one in. And one other requirement for F&O is this customer group ID. So I'm going to select that. But that said, everything's come in from the lead. We still have the address record. No address to, which we'll see later is the invoice address. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So now what's happening is it's real time moving the data. It's going through the validations on the CE side. It passed all those. It also went through all the validations on the F&O side to create the customer record. If there was any failure to pass validation on either side, an error message would pop up and neither record would be saved. But we have everything aligned, the customer account was created, and now that the order is in, it's going to be up to the ERP system, the F&O, to fulfill and work with it from there. So second hat I'm going to wear is that of somebody working in accounts receivable. So now that we have the account, or customer account in here, we can see it listed. We'll open it up. I'm going to do three things to this account. First, there's always some sort of credit check process that goes to place, and we'll just say that process has happened, and we're going to give these guys a $100,000 credit limit. Also, I just want to add a website because for some reason we get some information from the customer on their website. It's a URL type, and it's going to be their primary website. Now, in addition to that, we also learned that the invoice address is different than the delivery address. So I'm going to add an invoice address, and bear with me while I fill this out. Type invoice. This is the primary. Actually, no. Okay, that address is in place. So I'm going to save the record here, and I'm going to jump back to CRM. We're going to see that all that information has flowed back to CRM. So we're going to see that the invoice address has been listed as address 2, which we've configured. The credit limit is listed here. Typically this is just for display for the salesperson to see, but it's information coming from F&O. And we can see that the website is acme.com. So yeah, now at this point, if there was any update to the delivery address, we can come in here. We can also change the delivery address. We're going to say it's no longer 123 Main Street. Now it is 555 Main Street. Save that. Flowing back. We're going to refresh. Again, it's amazing. It goes through all of the different validations on both sides and is successful. We have the address has been updated real time. So that concludes the demo. It really showing a smooth handoff transition between the two systems, the two different roles in an organization. It does not require duplicate entry, and it's breaking down the silos and allowing for a free flow of information.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to all of you for joining us. That concludes our session. We hope you have some ideas now how you can break down your own silos. So now it's your turn. What questions do you have for us?
Thanks everyone for joining us. I don't see any questions in the chat at this time. So Jeff, do you maybe want to start us off and talk about virtual entities while we wait for some questions?
Well, yeah, I do want to make a quick comment about the fact that the virtual entities are seriously changing at a fast pace. Microsoft has been making updates to them so that even since this was recorded and now there have been a bunch of new connectors created to make it easier to connect to different areas. But I just wanted to point that out to fill some time here. We'll take any questions anybody's got. We see some chat going on.
Yeah, it looks like there are some questions now. Do you see those in the chat?
I see a couple, and there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm not sure exactly what the one question is, and I see it. It's great to see them coming in.
So is it not possible with dual write? If you could be a little bit more specific, I'm not sure at what point in the video that was. So move on to the next question. How does the sales user experience change with the introduction of dual write?
Oh boy, where to begin? You want to start?
Sure. I mean, a big part of that sales experience is dual entry is what I see all the time. Every project I go into, I hear them say I enter it here and then I enter it here, and I just cringe every time. To give users an experience where they can enter it once and then it just flows over somewhere else changes the experience quite a bit and saves a lot of time for everyone. What else? Earlier in this session, Jeff mentioned read-write on the virtual entities. Do you want to go into that a little bit, Jeff?
Yes, I do. And that was actually documentation that was updated, like a week before we had this. And I actually have some coworkers that worked with that full CRUD operations, read-write, and so on. I know for the longest time that they hadn't been, that it was mainly read. And I know you could use virtual entities with F&O with full CRUD operations for quite some time, but using the other connectors to say like Azure SQL or on-premise SQL or any other OData REST endpoint, you had to create your own. But yeah, you got full CRUD. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to share my screen to show any virtual entity config. That's a very good question, but that could lead us down another 45 minutes. It's pretty in-depth and interesting. Let's see.
And I think Paul is saying, is that for all virtual entities or just those related to F&O?
And I'm not quite sure the context here.
Yeah, Paul, if you could maybe ask, where the questions are a little delayed, so I'm not sure if you could just be a little bit more specific. We can get back to that.
But I'll answer. There's another good question about will it work with on-prem and not in the cloud? And I'm assuming at that point it was the dual write. That is, I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I know it works in the cloud. We haven't had to try on-prem, and I haven't looked at the documentation for that. But if you're in terms of virtual entities, I think it's kind of the same thing. It depends on what version you are in CRM. But I don't believe that you can. I know it's a little bit farther behind the cloud. Yes. And another question about the global address book available in dual write. So I'll explain that a little bit. At the core, there is a global address book solution that we can install in CE for dual write, and with that comes a host of entities, tables on CE side that mirror what F&O has for data structure. And then there's also a combination, a bunch of plugins that help that allow the user experience in C to remain the same, but create those supporting records. And so there is an actual party entity that gets created on the CE side, and that will match what the party table on the F&O side for what is integrated. So we'll say customers, right? Every customer that's integrated with F&O will have to have a party record in both CE and F&O. If you're integrating contacts, same thing. You'll have a party record for the contacts on both sides, and vendors, same thing with vendors. And I see another question here from Erica about the electronic addresses, contact addresses. And I guess cumbersome, it feels like a subjective term about what you want to feel like. The integrations that we've done, we have not turned on the electronic addresses. Instead, we've just integrated the primary email, phone number, anything that's primary in that contact list on the F&O side comes over. So we haven't had requirements yet that integrate. Where we would need to use that would be if there are requirements for non-primary, emails and stuff like that. We can also use dual write to integrate those in a way, but we've kept the electronic address term out of the CE side because it's something that the CE side doesn't understand, and it's quite confusing at first. But if we needed to, I feel that it's more about terminology than how to use the data. Oh boy, great questions. I love it.
That is a good one.
And I'm not sure I'm 100% following this latest question, but I can speak to it a little bit. Maybe there is an answer. First of all, I didn't talk about the unique identifiers, but as far as the integration goes, it works mainly on like account number. Like for a customer, it's account number. We don't really get the GUIDs on the CE side involved with unique identifiers, but rather a combination. We can use a combination of things like any SQL database, admin can use a combination of fields to create a key. We can do that with dual write as well. We configure it through, there is an integration key section that we configure it. And supporting that too is on the CE side, there's I believe it's called secondary key, or not secondary key, maybe it's just keys, where we can configure keys there as well. Well, yeah, I hope we're getting some good answers for everybody. It's great to see the participation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any other questions? Give it just a minute here, maybe.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of delay, so we'll let it roll for a little bit. But in the meantime, is there anything else that...
Oh, here's one. One just came in.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm guessing the address validation or verification is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is.
And if that's the case, I don't have any specific, APIs or third parties that do the address verification. I know I have heard of others using Avalara, but mainly for tax purposes, validating address mainly for tax purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, dual write is specific to F&O.
Sadly. But there's other methods you could use there, like Power Automate. We just had somebody, at Stone Ridge use Power Automate for BC to CE. So there's other options. What's great about Power Automate is it works with so many different systems. So that's always an option too.
And I see a question here about some documentation. And honestly, I'm not sure where that is, but if we can talk for a little bit longer, I can throw something in the chat window here.
Yeah, Microsoft is getting a lot better with documentation, though, I will say.
Virtual entities.
Is OData for the primary connector? Do you know the answer to that one, Jeff?
Yes, it is. I'm guessing you're talking about virtual entities. There is a out-of-the-box OData connector, OData 4 connector.
Okay, well, Jeff's looking. Any other questions?
And I'll put a place to start for virtual entities in here. There'll be links. You get started with some documentation and link off to. You can go a few different routes to the technical side or the functional side, but help you to set up.
Perfect. Erica says, can you discuss data migration? Do you use dual write for your initial data load? Ooh, that's a good question. There's some debate on that.
I love that. I have one project where we are doing that and another project where we aren't. Preference is to, in both those situations, we are live on CE for a while, and then F&O came online later. And the preference is it's a lot easier because I know that on the F&O side, there's those that have their data migration process, the data migration part, that's what we call it anyway, to load customer data, load all the data. The preferred way is to do that. So even though CRM has been running for a while, we can take some exports of that. Account numbers are key, right? Take an export of that with account numbers and all the information that we need for F&O, import that into F&O while do write is turned off, right? And turn things on where we know data-wise we have a matching key in CE and F&O. So dual write will know in that case, as long as the key is configured correctly, it will know to either update or create. There's also some ancillary data behind the scenes that needs to be set as well. So I highly recommend testing that out and working through that scenario. But that's one instance. In another project, very similar, we're using dual write to load the data. So there's still going to be some data migration stuff, but we are turning on the dual write to do an initial load of the customers. Now with that, we also have some work. We have some SQL Server integration services packages. I mentioned earlier that the party record works, and I'll wrap it up real quick here. Where the party record exists. So we had to create records on the CE side that mirror the F&O side before we could integrate. But you can go both ways. Our preferred method is to not use dual write to do an initial load.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone. We're out of time today, but we can continue conversation in a breakout room. And we hope to see everyone at DynamicsCon Live in San Antonio, Texas. I will be there, so I hope to see all of you. Thanks again.